USA versus Iran Military Power Comparison 2025. In this comparison, we will compare the military power of the USA and Iran in 2025. We will go through number of weapons, tanks, forces, manpower, air defense, jets, strategy, etc., and we will see which one is stronger. The US has around 9,700 combat vehicles, and Iran has around 1,700 combat vehicles. So the US has around 6 times more combat vehicles than Iran does. The United States of America has by far the most powerful military in the world, with a military budget of over $700 billion per year. Iran has a military budget of around $21 billion per year, so the US spends more than 30 times more on its military than Iran does. The US has around 1.5 million active military personnel and around 800,000 people in reserve, so the US has around 4 times more people than Iran has. The US has a much larger military budget, more military personnel, more tanks, more combat vehicles, a much larger Navy and Air Force, and many more military assets than Iran. The only area where Iran has an advantage over the US is in terms of population, but even then, it's not a huge advantage. Iran has around 4 times more people than the US has. However, the US has a much larger economy and a much higher GDP per capita, so the US can easily afford to increase its military spending and its military power even more. Also, the US has around 4 times more land area than Iran has. Iran has 0 aircraft carriers, 0 destroyers, and 0 submarines. So in terms of Navy, the US is much stronger than Iran. The US has also around 10 times more air defense systems than Iran has. The US has around 315 combat jets, and Iran has around 215 combat jets. So the US has around 1.5 times more combat jets than Iran has. Iran has around 640,000 active military personnel and around 350,000 people in reserve. So the US has a larger force with more people in active service and in reserve. The United States has around 5,500 tanks, and Iran has around 260 tanks. So the US has around 21 times more tanks than Iran has. The US has several military bases in the region, and also US troops are present in many Middle Eastern countries. Iran's strategy is to support groups and organizations that oppose the US and its allies in the region. For example, Iran supports Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels. Both countries have a big navy. The US has around 11 aircraft carriers, 90 destroyers, and 70 submarines. When it comes to Air Force, the US has around 13,000 Air Force personnel, and Iran has around 3,000 Air Force personnel. Iran has a population of around 85 million people, and the US has a population of around 335 million people. When it comes to military strategy, the US has a well-known strategy to have a strong military presence in the Middle East. So to conclude, the US is much stronger than Iran in terms of military power. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.